Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another B.R.B. First of all, before we go into this, a word from our sponsor, Goidcoin. Buy it, sell it, use it, abuse it. It can be used for anything, and it wants it that way. Now, Doku, you have an opinion about something. I believe you'd like to talk about the humorous thing known as ha 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 free speech.
Well, yes. So before I really get into this, Jacob actually sent me some things on Discord, so I'm gonna read what he sent out. Bear with me a little bit. It's a bit long, but
Mhm.
this is kind of what kicked off the whole idea. And Jacob, again, thanks for bringing this up because I do think it's a good. It'll make for a good discussion.
Welcome, Jacob.
Americans constantly talk about defending free speech, yet whenever I look across the water to the UK, I've been questioning as to how far that defense will go. If there are those who actively decide they'll spread lies about the past of a Western nation, who will even go as far as to demand that nation they're in continues to cater to those who actively and publicly announce their hate for said country. Arguments are not clearly working for such people. They make it clear they have no care for the argument, the debates, and that they intend to take from a country which owes them nothing, but are convinced they were somehow victimized due to a warped perception of the past. A warped perception instigated by many, ranging from private to local institutions, business conglomerates, local and federal governments, and even promoted by banks. When the system is more than just governmental decisions being made, where it's clear various aspects of a society have been subverted by those who have a clear agenda against said society and its people, how far is anyone willing to stick with, I'll protect their right to speak, when it's not just voicing an opinion, but what can practically be considered a declaration of war on the society and its people? To me, to be more blatant, it's more blatant in the UK, but the US is being just as blatant. That system has been subverted. Almost all aspects of American society have been corrupted by those who, in previous eras, would be labeled internal threats. The system has never truly been just the three branches, but as well as private and public institutions, to even what used to be the spiritual backbone of American society, a common religion. So many want to think that it's just a few simple aspects that need to be dealt with. But as we see now, this is very far from what currently is taking place. It takes more than technicalities written down to create a cohesive society. Those technicalities need to be those that protect common cohesive elements of a society, which are not the technicalities themselves. It also needs to be held up in such a way that is filled with people who understand this and have also invested interest in the well-being of the society and its people. It needs to be more than keeping their position, more than getting a paycheck that reinforces the sense of duty to a society and its people. A society needs commonalities to make it cohesive, especially common special interest. Those no longer exist. Majority of Western nations do not have this, which is how so many would be rightfully labeled as internal threats to social stability. They are and are permitted to continue their active war against Western nations and Western identity. Thoughts?
What you want my thought on this?
Yeah.
Oh, this
Okay,
is YouTube.
this sounds all well and good. Okay, and there's a lot of that element to it. Okay, but the reality is not that's not what the problem is. While I do recognize exactly what the guy is saying from a free speech standpoint, the problem isn't the speech. The problem isn't sit up there saying, okay, we're allowing free speech. In fact, it's the exact opposite. All right. And what I mean by that is this. All right. Sure. You're having people saying that we have freedom of speech, but they're then turning around and denying it. All right. If you come back and say that this is about free speech, then why are you trying to shut somebody up because you don't like what they said? Okay. It doesn't matter what they said, especially from a political standpoint. It's one thing. Okay, to sit up there and talk about this. Now, this goes back to another problem, okay, which I've tried to point out many times. There are times and places for speech, but when you talk about free speech, it has to remain within a general discourse. When it becomes a threat to the nation, a true threat to the nation, okay, then what you can have is the nation suspend temporarily that right. And it's happened before in America. Okay, this is what people don't understand. You can't allow, when you're at war, a fifth column. Okay, you cannot allow it to exist. You can't not allow it to percolate, and you definitely cannot allow it to be promoted. Now, when is the nation in threat during a war? This is kind of a difficult statement, right? But during World War II, people talking about the suspension of rights during World War II. Yeah, you did have a suspension of rights. Guess what? That's normal. That's normal, and it's what's more is it's legal. Now, once you declare the war over, then it has to. Those things have to go away as well. Those restraints have to go away as well, which is one of the problems that I've been bitching about when people don't actually use an actual declaration of war when they talk about use of force. Use of force and a declaration of war are two different things. All right. So when you start talking about commonalities within society are not. Free speech isn't threatened. Doesn't threaten that. What threatens it, all right, isn't speech. What threatens it is a lack of responsibility being applied to the individual. Just because an individual can say something doesn't mean that individual should be free of consequences. And unfortunately, that is where our societies are falling down, because you're not being held accountable for your freaking actions. It's not the speech, it's the actions. It's not what's said, it's what doesn't get done or what's being done.
Well, and that's a good point. I actually, something else I brought up when I was talking to Jacob is in regards to having a coherent society and people who have a vested interest in the well-being of that society versus people who actively seek to subvert it or undermine it from within. The analogy I often use is that of the tolerant left. The problem with the tolerant left and why the left is no longer holds what would be considered traditional liberal values is because they invited in people who, in the spirit of tolerance or fairness or free speech, they've invited in people who actively seek to destroy them. They've invited in their enemies, and I say, like Jacob had said, I'll defend your right to say it. Well, at what point in time do you say the actions being taken, the undermining and subversion of societal standards, destroying the country from within, when does that supersede or become more of a more important aspect than just, I defend your right to say it even though I disagree with it? Because they're actively using what I would consider to be free speech as a weapon in order to destroy and subvert that culture, because these people fundamentally don't hold the values of free speech or freedom of expression, freedom of religion, right to assembly. Those aren't part of their core values. What they want is they actually want a more authoritarian type of state. And they're using these freedoms as ways to subvert that culture and essentially destroy it from within, whether it's legal or illegal, and depending on your outlook. At what point in time do you consider that enough of a threat that you do recognize it as essentially a declaration of war?
Well, but you can tolerate that as long as you're still holding people accountable, and as long as you're holding people responsible for their actions. You don't have to necessarily do it. Now, if you're already at war where you cannot sit up there and take certain risks, then that's a separate matter, all right? But that's not what's happened today. All right. What's happened today is the fact that they've shut people up. They've gone out of their way to censor people with political correctness. And it was going on long before many of you guys have even realized this. All right. And it goes back to Rodney King, folks. Now, I know a lot of people think that with Rodney King that he was abused and all these bad things happened to him and the police were overreacting. No, the first thing that should have been done is the first thing that should have been held accountable at that point was Rodney King's own actions. It had to take priority. Why? Because everything devolved from there. Now, you can say, well, I think that the police abused their authority here, and I could just look at you and go, why do you think that? Well, they didn't need to do X, Y, Z. Were you there? Did you struggle with the guy to try and stop him? Were you able to do this? No, you weren't. So what you did is you sat back, saw a video, all right, which only shows, by the way, right, him being clubbed, and then you see him stop being clubbed, and he tries to get up. In other words, not listening to what the police are saying, stay down, stay down, stay down, and then gets clubbed some more. That used to be a standard, folks. That used to be the standard. In fact, if you ran away from the police, the standard was if you run away from the police, you run the risk of being shot by the police. Okay, and there was not going to be any consequence to that from the police perspective. You were running away from the police. You were committing a crime. Now, can it be that this was wrong? Can this be that the police overreacted? Sure. Okay, but it doesn't absolve you as the individual. When you heard the police stop and you didn't stop and got fired on, oh well.
Well, and I'll just go ahead and read this real quick. MC, I know this, but the system itself has been subverted for a very long time. The truth is we can't hold these people accountable for anything. And I don't necessarily disagree with that statement. There is an issue with holding people accountable for their actions, whether it's speech, physical, or otherwise. And something else I'd like to point out, you brought up censorship. A lot of these people who claim like, oh, well, it's free speech, you do realize that your ideological opposition will claim free speech for themselves, but then will also try to use censorship to silence you because they disagree with the political opposition. This is a classic Saul Alinsky tactic. You hold your opponents accountable to the same standard they hold themselves, but as the saying goes, don't be unwilling to lie or cheat or punch below the belt. When they go high, we go low. That has been a very common political tactic for quite some time, and what a lot of people have to realize, at least people from the ideological sense, is your opponent is willing to lie and cheat or change the rules so that they win. They're not trying to play the game fairly or honorably. And if you continue to try to play by the rules and not by their rules but your own, you're going to continue to lose.
Well, it goes back to the statement of war. The enemy, the aggressor sets the parameters for the war. The aggressor is the one who defines the limits. All right. If your aggressor is willing to kill, all right, women and children, then you'd better be willing to kill women and children because the rule is defined by them. Okay. When it comes down to, and this has been a problem, right? When it comes down to free speech and stuff, yeah, the left has been willing to lie. Okay. And the right hasn't. That doesn't mean that the right has to lie, but the right has to be able to call them out. And what's more is they got to have the courage to call them out. And this is where they started falling down because when they called it out, the one group that needed to help support them were those wishy little moderates, and they were silent. And what happened is too many on the right got scared because they were thinking that they were alone, because they were thinking that they were being isolated, because the left did that to them. But the right is finding its voice now. This is why you're seeing the discourse right now, especially from a civil standpoint, break down. Yes, you're seeing a breakdown in civility. Why? Because the left never had it, and the moderates didn't support it when they had the chance to stand up for truth. When you had the chance to stand up for truth, when the left was going bonkers with their shit and it was pointed out to you, you laughed and poo-pooed, but you didn't stick your necks out because you were afraid of getting what conservatives have been getting for the past 4 decades. You were afraid to sit up there. So when a moderate jumps up now and tells me, hey, wait a minute, a pox on both houses, I don't want to hear it anymore. You want to know why? Because no matter what you say, they're far worse, and you won't acknowledge it. In fact, you go out of your way not to acknowledge it just to appease those same people. Why? Because you're afraid of them.
Oh,
That's why I have no tolerance for the moderates.
Jacob says, I'm not saying that we have to lie, but we need to realize that anyone politically right-leaning needs to stop thinking that the system is a fair playing field. And you're correct. And that goes back. And that goes back to my statement of you have to realize you can hold your moral values and your standards all you want, but you have to realize your ideological opponent is willing to lie, is willing to cheat, is willing to do anything they have to in order to gain power and then consolidate it once they've taken it. And that's the thing. It's not that they will be given it. They won't be voted into it. They're willing to do anything they can so they can take power. That's where their mindset is. They have no regards for the rules or regards to, agree to disagree. That's not how they play this game. Their goal is one thing and one thing only. It's very, very simple. If you're not on their side, they consider you an enemy to be viewed as a threat under any circumstances, whether it's justified or not, and something that is an obstacle to be taken down and destroyed. They will go to any means they have to that they can get away with in order to achieve that goal. Because at the end of the day, they're authoritarians. They are not willing to have any real threat to their power or positions of power. or their ability to influence society. And this is why I consider them, as Jacob said, essentially a threat to the stability of a society. Their vested interest is not yours, not mine, not even the structure of society itself having a well-functioning social framework. Their goal is just simply self-serving power. That's it. And they're very, very good at utilizing tactics that, things that we would consider just basic freedoms, taking those and twisting them and turning them into a weapon to be used against, again, whoever they consider to be an ideological obstacle.
Right, but they do that, but they don't do that with logic. They do that with the way they get around that is with fifis. Okay, this is why they stress fifis, their feelings, how I feel. All right, and this is where a lot of this stuff comes about, because if you start talking about this stuff from a logical standpoint, if you start holding them accountable to logic, their logic falls apart very quickly. Okay, this is one of the problems with our society vis-a-vis, for example, Japanese society. Right? Take a look at what happens in Japanese society. Where is their manga? Where is their anime? What is it all focused on? What do their artists focus on? You ever notice this? One of the things that they always focus on is the power of the individual. Okay, if you ever take a look at all their artwork, right? Their artists focus on the fact that they feel as an individual, I have to express myself as an individual. Why? Because their society itself is very regimented. Okay, this is and Jensen will back me up on this. Having a regimented society is comforting in so many ways. You just don't recognize it unless you've been a part of it, right? This sounds alien to people who have never actually lived, all right, and experienced what it's like to be in a regimented society where a lot of your decisions are taken away from you. But while a lot of those decisions are taken away from you, the fact that they're taken away from you makes your life more linear. It makes it easier to deal with things because you don't have to focus on something. If something's been taken away and you don't have it anymore, then you don't worry about it very quickly.
He's right.
And so, I mean, I don't disagree with it.
Okay, the difference is when society is doing it, all right, versus what the legal ramifications within it are. Okay, this was different in Western culture, especially in the United States, because the one thing that we had in common, which has been breaking down, has been the rule of law. Have you noticed the primacy of the rule of law breaking down in our countries more than any other thing? It's not, well, I have the right to protest. Yeah, but you have the right to protest legally. You ever notice how I've got the right to protest? You have to let them protest. You have to let them, I don't have to let them break the law. Okay? Well, what if they find that law is bad? What laws are they breaking that you find bad? Tell me, if you take a look in Portland, right? Do you see them breaking laws that they disagree with, or do you see them just breaking the law? Do they disagree that there shouldn't be people walking around in the middle of the streets? No. Do you think that they disagree with the fact that laws should be in place? No. But then what is it that they're protesting? Well, they're not protesting the law. Oh! I'm protesting a nebulous thing. Police brutality, I'm saying. Okay, well, what's brutality to you, and what's brutality to that guy over there, and what's brutality to that guy over there, right, are three different things. Because it's a nebulous concept. Okay, so this is how they do it. This is how they get away with it. Right? Is their focus, they start focusing people's fifis. They'll show you something. Oh, look at the poor little child being beaten. All right? How could he be beaten like this? Well,
let's read this real quick from Jacob. MC, rule of law has never been enough to keep society stable. Social aspects like common identity and common religion are major factors to keeping a cohesive society.
Incorrect. Okay. It wasn't always religion, and don't get me wrong, religions are a cohesive force. I'm not disagreeing with that standpoint. All right. The rule of law, right, does keep societies together? How do you think that Tito was able to keep Yugoslavia together? Because he laid the law down, and if you didn't agree with it, he made you agree with it. They enforced it. Okay? Enforcement of the law is as critical to the law, all right, as following the rules themselves.
Well, and I will make I'm going to use Jensen's neck of the woods as an example here. The more a society is, what's the word I'm looking for? Homogenous, generally the more stable it is. I mean, you can look at Japan, you can look at, compare Japan to post Europe is open for business immigration type policies, where they're just bringing people in from different societies and different cultures that don't have a shared cultural value or even a shared identity. It generally breaks things down. And this is not an ist and ism phobic type of argument. It's just a simple observation. If you can look at if you look at kids on a playground, or if you've seen any high school cafeteria, guess what? People generally form groups around people that are similar to them. The football team usually sits with the other football players. The cheerleaders sit with the cheerleaders. The soccer team sits with the soccer team. And this can be a racial thing as well. Black people, white people, Asian, Hispanic generally like to surround themselves with people who are similar to them, who share similar cultural values, tend to look the same. And that's the reason Chinatown exists. And this is kind of a natural defense mechanism if we're being very, non-Fifi oriented, but actually just looking at objectively what is factually true about societies throughout history. When someone is an outsider, they're generally not trusted. They're deemed as a threat. It's tribal mentality, but it's human beings as pack animals have this ingrained in us. We feel more comfortable surrounded by people who are similar to us. And now, if you go down the more quote intellectual path of things, having open discourse, open conversations, understanding what somebody's political beliefs are, what their taste in music is, or what movies they like, can usually overcome that you look different than me, therefore I don't trust you. But that still requires people having to sit down and talk and converse with each other, which requires somewhat of a stable environment for that to even occur and take place. This is the problem with the redefining of words. Or the ability, or trying to silence and censor people, or just blatant open fear mongering, where you completely shut down the ability for people to talk and have a social discourse. That breaks down society at its root core, because you will never be able to come to that understanding. And this is something that we're seeing happen in the West, both Europe and in the United States, where the ability to have discourse is breaking down, because God forbid that you happen to be a Hispanic or Black and support Trump and not Biden. It's a root cause of the problem, and it goes back to what Jacob was saying. At what point do you look at this and say this isn't really about free speech anymore, but it's more about the survival of the society as a whole?
The society, despite not having legal authority, did have social authority, which is why, if you were an atheist back then, you wouldn't be accepted by most communities. Okay. The problem that you're dealing with there is what's the term acceptance mean? Okay, this has always been an issue. Okay, just because you are one religion or another, and Christianity has a variety of mutually hostile sects to it. All right, whether you like to admit this or not, when you say that the founding fathers created a homogeneous societies, yes, and the societies in and of themselves were somewhat homogeneous. The word is somewhat, all right? They were also, however, insular. They were allowed to be insular. And this is what happened. This is what the damage has been done when they came back and they started saying, okay, we need to sit up there and stop being insular. We need to be always diverse. We need to be accepting. We need to accept all these people. All right. The problem with that is that it breaks down exactly what you're talking about from a social cohesion. But America didn't need that. Why? Because you had a lot of different groups that were able to self-isolate to an extent, that were able to coalesce and be left alone. All right. The federal government wasn't in charge. The state governments were only more powerful than the federal government at one point. All right. And therefore, they weren't dictating diversity. Nobody was dictating diversity. All right. Yes. Did you have cities that outlawed smoking? Yes, you had cities that outlawed smoking. You had cities that outlawed alcohol and tobacco. If somebody wanted to outlaw opium, they could do it. The cities themselves did it, as long as it wasn't federally mandated. You could maintain that type of cohesion, all right, if within that small little area, it was allowed to be tolerated. All right. If you wanted to take opium, you didn't go to one of those areas that sit up there and said, no, opium is banned. You went somewhere else. All right. But see, then came down well, I'm an individual and you have to accept me for being the individual that I am. And that's where it changed. That's where the problem is. This whole diversity crap is just that. You have to tolerate my intolerance of you. No, I don't have to tolerate my intolerance of you. You have to tolerate my intolerance, right? And if you don't tolerate my intolerance, go somewhere else. That's what America was founded on. Okay, that's the principle that was created. And it was if we as a small little community set a rule of law here, you had to respect it. That was the difference. The one thing that held us in common across the different areas of America, of the United States, was a respect for the rule of law. Not any specific religion, not any freaking specific creed or culture or even language to an extent. English is the common language is absolutely critical. Okay, I'm going to point that out. The common language is absolutely critical, and that was one of the first things that they had to destroy. It was one of the first things that they had to put it into. Press 2 for freaking Spanish. Okay, that was always a mistake. Always a mistake.
Oh, and I don't disagree with that. Like, again, I'll use Japan as an example. They're not going to allow you to live in the country for very long if you can't speak the language or at least aren't making an effort to learn the language. Because, again, like you said, the ability to communicate is crucial for a functioning society. You're not going to have a functioning society if people can't communicate with each other. It's just not going to work.
Right, and that's to be honest is with the Balkanization. The real Balkanization came down to why Yugoslavia got destroyed. People don't realize this, but Yugoslavia got destroyed not because they, Tito. What Tito was doing is using rule of force to prevent groups, not ethnic groups as far as speaking goes, but ethnic groups that spoke entirely different languages, right, in one homogeneous state.
Well, it's the same principle behind if you can shut down speech. There's a couple of ways to do it. You can do it through public shaming, ostracization, threats, intimidation. That's one way to do it. Blatantly open censorship, just silencing people simply because they happen to have a political or different political belief or different religious belief, or much more basic, they simply don't look like me or I don't like this person, so therefore they're not allowed to talk, or siphoning off, or not siphoning off, but isolating people to certain areas, certain circles, so they can't influence the larger group as a whole with their ideas. Or again, having a language barrier where you can't communicate because you don't speak the same language. They all have the same effect, and the end result of that effect is again a breakdown of society, which for someone who is trying to subvert or destroy a society from within is probably one of the most effective and, ironically enough, in our modern world, an accepted tactic. And that's actually where I start to draw a point of contention, and it goes back to what I said about the idea of blind tolerance. If you tolerate everything, you're going to invite in those that seek to destroy you. You'll end up actually having to stand for nothing just because it will go blatantly against the idea of being tolerant. Well, you have to be tolerant of this person. At what point do I become intolerant of it? Does it require my community being destroyed? Does it require me losing my job? Does it require my friends and family being attacked because somebody made a joke on Facebook 10 years ago? Does it require somebody pointing a gun at me? Does it require someone losing their life? At what point in time do you say, I will no longer tolerate this?
Well, the problem, the point is in America, where's that point? The point is when you use force to enforce your diktats. That's where you run into it. Okay, that's where you have to draw the line. Violence.
If
This
I
is
may,
why. Go ahead.
if I may, I actually agree with MC there, and it's not just America. Okay, in Britain, we had a thing known as Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. It was known around the whole world because it was the bastion of free speech in England. And remember, England doesn't have the free speech that you guys do. But there, you could basically say anything that wasn't directly attacking somebody, and no bugger could do anything about it. Until recently, when a bunch of Christian types were up there doing their little thing, and the Muslims had them arrested for hate speech.
Well, if I remember correctly, that was the original public square where the whole idea of free speech came from.
Yes, it was. I'm talking going back literally to the beginning of, well, civilization, for want of a better. You could sit there and say that the ancient times had their civilizations. Yes, they did. I'm not arguing that. But pretty much everything really sort of kicked in after about 1400. That's when real civilization started to kick in, and we moved on from there. And like I said, Speaker's Corner was the prime thing. Nowadays, it's nothing. Okay? The Muslims, and this is not an anti-Muslim statement. I'm defining this as the group, not as individuals or anything like that. They chose to get rid of the Christians. Oh, and here's the thing, just to show exactly how fair it was. They immediately went about doing their prayers in exactly the same place, and nobody was allowed to stop them because, well, if you go against them, that would be racist after all.
Well, that kind of goes back to the point where I was talking about having shared cultural values, and it doesn't necessarily have to be grounded in religion or grounded in this idea of classical liberalism or Renaissance liberalism or what I would call modern day regressivism. But you're not going to exist for very long in a tolerant society when there's no shared cultural value. And the example you used is perfect for illustrating that point, because the Muslims in question, in regards to the Christians, they're intolerant of it. They do not share the same cultural value of, I believe you have your right to religion, your right to free speech, do as you please. They are fundamentally intolerant. And
Yes.
yet we can't criticize them because there has been this established norm now in modern society where, well, if you criticize this person, you must be an ist or an ism or a phobic, when in reality it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that they do not share my values, and they actually seek to be an oppressor. It's quite literally the opposite.
Right. But what you have to do then is you have to broaden that to the larger society as we had in the United States. Okay. One of the problems that you had now, Jensen or Jacob rather, the United States has did deport thousands of Hispanics. All right, when it was proven their president was becoming a negative factor in society. No, not really. Right. I mean, the United States has always had an odd allowance of immigration or non-immigration along its southern border. Okay. So the reality is that we've Texas for the longest time was completely Spanish speaking. All right. Now, once you start realizing that you have to speak English and English becomes predominant, it becomes a whole different matter. But the majority of people in Texas, all right, for a long period of time, were Mexicans. All right. They're descendants of Mexicans. They were Hispanic. That's the majority in Texas. Okay. When Texas joined the Union, you still had a majority, all right, of Hispanic. It was a different cultural mindset, but they were allowed to be different. When Doku, when you were saying something about the natural part of human society and how humans make cliques and how humans establish things, one of the things that I constantly remember, right, is an interview with Kim Hunter, right? For those who don't know, Kim Hunter played one of the chimpanzees, the female chimpanzee scientist in Planet of the Apes. All right, she's just an actress. But one of the things, all right, that shocked her was on the set, the chimpanzees, the people that got into makeup, and back then, they weren't the rubber masks that come on later. The first Planet of the Apes, the people were dedicated to the craft, and they sat in those chairs, those makeup chairs, for hours on end. Okay, and they had to be very, very careful with certain things, right? And so once you got made up, once you were made up as a chimp or anything else, you were a chimp for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, what they found was that during like lunch breaks, in the breaks, the chimps all sat together. All right. The orangutans all sat together. The gorillas all sat together. They naturally did this. And in fact, people who were good friends of hers, all right, for example, the guy who played Dr. Zayas, right, the orangutan, right, was a good friend of hers named Maurice Evans, all right, and she realized that while Maurice, someone that she knew her entire life, had been a great friend of hers, she wasn't sitting with him for lunch. She wasn't sitting at his table. It was like somebody she personally knew. But when that mask was on, he became something else. Okay, this was something else. This was something that shocked her when she realized that was going on. She also talked about some of the other problems they had with it. For example, Maurice was a smoker, right? And he had to. I think it was Maurice that she was talking about. Could no longer smoke a cigarette, right? So that's where he literally had to go out there and buy that stupid stick that you in order to use, back in the old days where they had that big long stick, all right, at the end of the smoking, all right, like the penguin in the old Batman cartoons, walked around with. All right, he had to use those because he couldn't smoke in the masks, right, in the makeup. It would ruin the makeup, right? So these are some of the things. It was good, very good interview about the whole thing. Yes, this is very true. The difference is not tolerating other people's societies, not tolerating the fact that if you want to live over there and be like that, then go be that way. One of the problems, and of course this all gets tied into racism, because racism does play a role here. When you have Chinatown, when you have Little Italy, when you have the ghetto black area, right? Harlem. People forget this. Harlem was not this downtrodden horror that it is today. Not back in the 1920s. Harlem had a richer area, a poorer area, but it was still predominantly black. All right? Because that's how they had separated. That's how people had separated. Was it always a good thing? No. Was it predominantly poorer than other areas like Manhattan? Yes. All right. But you had that same similar activity taking place wherever you went in Americana. All right. You could find in Americana, wherever you went, an area that was rich and an area that's not. All right. And see, it still remains true. Hispanics, on average, do commit more crimes and take up more welfare than most other groups. This is negative effects causing an increase in taxes to go up. No, that is not causing an increase in taxes to go up. The fact that you're paying welfare is what's causing the increase in taxes to go up. Okay?
Well, before we go down an economic rabbit hole. Yeah, before we go down an economic rabbit hole, I would like to point this out since what you brought up is something important. Again, a lot of people don't like to talk about it because they're afraid of being labeled a certain word or they're afraid of hurting somebody's fifis. Well, I'm sorry, we're not here to discuss your feelings or afraid of being labeled words. Or when you look at a cohesive and functioning society, human beings fundamentally are visual creatures. We're also pack animals. So societies start to form in a matter of different steps. Starting with the easiest is you're going to see people who look similar to each other start to congregate and form groups, and this will form the basis of a society. And that's why that's why you'll notice, again, the phenomena you see where people look a certain way, they'll sit with each other at the lunch table. Once you get a cohesive group together on that, it's usually based on visuals. Region can play a role in this as well, but it's based on visuals. A different color of dress amongst different tribes is a good example of this. But then you'll start to form certain values, and those values form based on the ability to be able to communicate. And that society will become more and more cohesive and more tight knit. You'll become more comfortable around people who are the same. And once that society is formed to a certain degree and starts growing, it starts interacting with other cultures and others, well, let's say other tribes around it, you'll notice that other tribes hold certain other values. If there's any type of intersection or overlap, those tribes are going to form larger groups, say a nation state, so to speak. If they don't, conflict breaks out. This is just and it's not just human beings that do this. This happens in the animal kingdom all the time when it comes to certain packs, and it happens amongst the same species as well. One pack. Look at what happens when a male lion moves from one pride into the territory of another pride. Conflict breaks out, but they're both still lions, but they're not the same. At least not as far as that pride is concerned. And this is what the left and its push for diversity and tolerance and acceptance is fundamentally ignored. Is not all cultures, even if they are the same and we speak the same language, share the same values. Conflict will erupt and break out. It's a natural thing. But to sit there and try to stop it or claim that, this is an ism problem is, to be honest, disingenuous. It's not accurate. It's not grounded in actual reality.
That's true. That's true, but but it also leads to something else, which goes to the conversation that we're having right now. You and I are having this conversation. We're having a discussion. We're having this discussion in good faith. Okay, if I have a term for something that is different than yours, you and I will discuss it, and we will come to a common reference point within that. The problem that you have with leftists is there is no common reference point within the same language. They use it, okay, to redefine exactly how they redefine things. And even if you, all right, and try to get them to go, okay, I'll use your definition, it's not good enough because they'll change it. Or they will say, or they will go, no, you can't bring this up because of this. They are not discussing this in good faith. They're not having the discussion in good faith because their discussion is not based on logic. It's not based on any single principle. It's based on their feelings. How they feel about it.
Some of that redefining of words, though, is actually calculated. And there's a very good example that's relevant currently in the news cycle when it comes to critical race theory and how Merriam-Webster redefined the term of racism rather than being judgment based upon the color of someone's skin or ethnicity to including a clause about the majority group and how you cannot be racist against the majority group because they're, well, the majority. So for whatever reason, that absolves you of being racist against them. Like, oh, this country's majority white. Well, you can't be racist against white people because they're the majority. Or you can't be racist against, does that apply to a country that's majority black or majority Muslim or majority Asian? Or are you capable of being racist against them? And again, it's like you said, it's a redefining of words because it's a tactic. It's meant to sow chaos and discourse. It's meant to create confusion. But that is the goal.
Right. And that's what it is. I won't sacrifice my principles just to fit in with the right. You don't have to sacrifice your principles to fit in with the right. The fact that you're worried about that, though, tells me something, Psycho. The fact that you think that you would have to sacrifice your principles to fit in with the right already tells me that you've swallowed the indoctrination of what the right is as defined by the feelings on the left. Because they have convinced you that you would not be welcome there.
Well, we were actually having this conversation in a back channel earlier today. I'll bring it up here for the show for everybody listening. I've noticed something.
Welcome, Psycho. It's been a long time since I saw you in the chat.
Oh yeah, welcome, Psycho. Thanks for joining us. But me and MC were talking about this a little while ago, so I'll bring it up here. I've noticed there's an interesting trend going on in the right, especially with the more nationalist, populist Trump MAGA movement, and then the more far left radical movement that's taking hold. And I'm not including your old guard Democrats in this. But what you'll find is that they're your Lincoln Project rhinos who essentially what the right perceives to be backstabbing and going against the agenda that they voted for are very quickly not trusted. But at the same time, if there's a Democrat who says, I actually kind of agree with this, they're not ostracized by the right. They don't care that it's coming from a Democrat or what their ethnicity or religion is. They're still accepted regardless. And there's a video that was going around the grapevine a while ago where it was a MAGA rally and then a bunch of counter protesters essentially. And I forgot who it was, but it was a woman, and she had.
Hold on a second. Hold just a second. Keep going with that. Just a minute. Pinoid. That's because you're a hedonist. Next, let's continue on.
But no, there was a woman, and she was there with a black man, and there was a MAGA rally going on. There was a bunch of counter protesters outside, so she went and he's like, okay, I'm going to take you over to the Trump side of things, and he's like, yeah, I don't think they're going to like me very much, and he thought it was going to be because he was black. Let's be blunt. That's the reason he thought he wasn't going to be accepted. There was not a single person there in a red MAGA hat that cared about the fact that he was black. No one gave a shit. No, the topic of race didn't come up at all. It was just like, hey, no, you're welcome here. And then they went to the other side with all the counter protesters, and they were freaking out like, why are you hanging out with this white woman? That's racist. Trump is racist, this and that. And you can see the guy's face, like you could see the realization, like, wow, these people are actually not only hateful and vitriolic, but they're the actual racist ones. They assume that this person is supposed to think and act a certain way based on the color of his skin, and how dare you be seen with this person because they're a Trump supporter and they're racist, therefore, like, you're stepping out of line. Stepping out of line and going against the narrative is not allowed. And that's what you'll notice about the whole left versus right paradigm. The right is not nearly as intolerant as the left is. And this is not a matter of opinion. It's an observable fact. If you look at how they act and interact with other people, especially those who ideologically disagree with them, the same people who claim, racism is bad, that side is racist, blah, 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 are also the same ones who are very quick to claim people are a coon or an Uncle Tom simply because of the color of their skin, holding the wrong political opinion in their mind. And again, if you don't believe me, there's a lot of instances and evidence of this that I could bring up multiple times. I'm not going to waste your time doing that.
If you really are interested in seeing that, all you have to do is take a look at what the left did to Tim Scott. Take a look at it. Go online. All right, go on to any social media and then put in Tim Scott, right, and say, and you can see it. You're not wrong, Doku, about the intolerance on the left, all right? But it's there. The intolerance on the left is there to shut up free speech. It's there to eliminate it, all right? They all talk about it while they cloak themselves in the rhetoric. The reality is that they do not want free speech. Okay, they will deny it to everyone but themselves. This is how they've always been. And when it's been pointed out, okay, that this is what their tactics were, this is what they were doing, they rely upon feelings, all right, to justify it, so it gets excused by the moderates.
Oh, and real quick, Pino in the chat, I'm not dumb enough to be a part of a side. I get what you're saying. I don't like the idea of tribalism. Tribalism will blindly lead you to voting for people who don't have your best interest at heart simply because they have a certain letter next to their name. It's important not to fall into that trap. What I am trying to illustrate, though, is that there is a common shared value, and you can see it happen. And it could easily, you could flip it and say, Republicans are this and Democrats are that. Sure, as long as there's a shared value. I'm not judging people based upon whether the Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party. What I will judge you on is based on your actions and what values you hold, not what you say, but how you actually act and interact and treat other people. And there is a distinct difference on the right than there is with the left. You can see what their values are based upon how they interact, especially with the political opposition. I rarely see Republicans go to the same degree of quote cancel culture that the left does. And I know people say like, the right is engaging in cancel culture. Why? Because you're not going to buy Coca-Cola because you don't agree with what their company stands for, or you're not going to buy a Gillette razor. That's not cancel culture. Cancel culture is going after somebody's kid and threatening them because they made a dad joke on Twitter 10 years ago. That's what the left does. The right doesn't do this, or at least if they do, it's very, very rare.
Well, they'll point out once again, they'll point out the Footloose, right, where the lady lost her job, all right, because of what her quote unquote son was doing, right. The problem with the movies, the problem with those things is, did things like that happen? In a sense, yes, but not in the broader sense, all right. What do I mean by that? There was always another factor that was involved. It wasn't because of the person, defending their son or anything else. Because for the most part, people respected the family. Okay, but see, the media, the way the media and the way that these leftists portray it, all right, is always outside a full context of things. This is something else that the left is very good at. Is sitting up there taking a situation, all right, and visually showing it out of context, right? This is how they've engaged in things. This is why they are masters of the Photoshop. What I mean by that is the Photoshop in like what's her name? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez crying about the children being held in cages, and then you get a wide screen of this, and where are these? Or CNN showing the picture of the kid in cage, and you pull back and you realize it was a cage put in the middle of the street, all right, that they got to sit up there and try and represent something that they wanted to claim existed. They're very good at this, all right, and it goes back decades, folks, decades. If you go back to the '68 picture that everyone has seen, all right, with the Vietnamese officer shooting a guy with his hands behind his head in his head, right, as he walked, standing there. Oh, they didn't give him a trial. They didn't give him this. He was a spy for the enemy. This was perfectly acceptable, all right, in a time of war by the Geneva Convention, and yet where were the left? Look at this, right? This guy's rights were being denied. How could you do something like this? In other words, taking the photo out of context, not being honest with what was seen. And it's not to deny that but there it is. There it is, memes. You are so terrified of pointing it out on the left that you have to find it on the right, that you have to sit up there and do this, so you can say that you're in the middle, so you can stay protected. Thinking that somehow in the middle, you're going to be safe. You're not going to be.
Well, there's a reason the saying "the left eats its own" is a thing, and it has to do with ideological tactics. The left generally is very aggressive, and when they don't have a common enemy, they'll find enemies. They'll find boogeymen no matter no matter where they look, because that's how they get their message across. The right does do this as well, but not to the same extent the left does, because the right tends to be more reactionary when it comes to that type of thing, versus the left is very much aggressive. And I'm not saying it's an ineffective tactic. It's actually extremely effective. Credit where credit is due. It works very well. Fear-mongering and propaganda go hand in hand. And again, don't take that the way you might, but it is an effective tactic, and it has been utilized on the left very, very, very effectively. A good example for what MC was talking about, there is a flood. Look at how terrible these things are. You see a CNN reporter standing in the street waist deep in water. But then you pan back a little bit, and the camera crew is only ankle deep in water. Again, it causes fear, it makes people desperate. It causes them to not think rationally. It creates confusion. This is how you can convince people, hey, look, I get it. There's a problem. I'm from the government. I'm here to help, so to speak. That's how they've been using this tactic over and over again. And despite negative implications of things happening, people keep voting for it. Why? It's because they're afraid. They're looking for someone to solve the problem. Doesn't matter if the problem gets solved or not. They're looking for that person. So if you can come there and say, hey, there's a problem here. Yeah, vote for me and I'll fix it. It's in your interest to not fix the problem, because that's what's going to get you reelected. And this has been going on for a long time. And also the right is extremely ineffective at addressing this problem, because the right is kind of spineless. They're spineless cowards, in my opinion. And even if they stand by their convictions, they continue to lose over and over and over again. The right's not going to get anything done.
The right's leadership is like that. And one of the reasons for that is this. There's a reason for that, and it's not what people think it is. One of the reasons why the right, it falls into the trap of being quote unquote spineless and everything, has a lot less to do, all right, with them being better or superior or anything else, and it goes to something memes has been talking about, right? But the right does it. One of the things that the right has been doing and has done it for a long time is they police their own, and they were helped. Don't get me wrong. The mainstream media did a very good job of pointing out, all right, the criminality, the true people that were only in it for themselves, that were using this for their own nefarious purposes in a rise to power. Those people are instantly pointed out every single time it happens on the right. The ones that are the moderates are left alone. All right. So if you know how to play the game with the left, if you give the left a little bit of what they want, they'll keep the media off of you for the most part, as long as you don't reach too high. As long as you stay within your lane, what the left was defining at that time as an acceptable lane, they would leave you alone. The result is that when it was pointed out, when the malfeasance is pointed out, the right will be more likely to take action and remove that cancerous element than the left will. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is take a look at Andrew Cuomo.
Well, here's another thing.
Show me something that's even comparable to that on the right.
Here's the other thing. Notice that the large groups of outrage mobs, especially when it comes to the way that mainstream media acts, nobody is afraid to drag the right. The right has a target on its back 24/7 simply for existing. And the right is, well, we recognize that. We're used to it. But God forbid that you call a riot a riot. Why? Because the right, occasionally they'll stand up for themselves, occasionally they'll get aggressive, but they're not nearly as aggressive as the left. You criticize the left, guess what? You're going to have a shitstorm coming your way. And if you don't believe me, go read any mainstream news article. Look at them, how many times they've tried to cancel Tucker Carlson. Do you see anybody going after Rachel Maddow with the same type of vigor? Do you see them getting any support? The majority of support they might get, someone might agree with it, but they sure as hell won't open their mouths because they know they'll be next. Look at Gal Gadot. What happened with her with the whole Israel-Palestine thing? Immediately, she gets a target on her because she's going against the narrative. And it's the left that's going after her. It's not the right. It's the left. And the thing is, Gal Gadot is not a conservative. If you forgot already, Gal Gadot is the one that started that whole Imagine TikTok fucking trend under COVID. Like, we're all in this together. Gal Gadot is one of the ones that started that. She is a Hollywood liberal, but they're still going after her. Why? Because she dared to step out of line with the narrative. Notice it wasn't until...
So it's my principles. You have no authority over my opinions, good or bad. That's okay, Psycho. Put up Psycho's other statement you had up there either, right? Not that one. Put the one before it. I'm not joining any movement. All right. I'm not joining any movements that starts by taking away people's freedoms. All right. I tend to agree with that. All right. I tend to come down on that. All right. The question though is, how are you defining a person's freedom?
Well, I wouldn't disagree with Psycho either.
The moment you sit up there and try and impose something on somebody else, you're not talking about one of your freedoms. If you're involving society, if you're involving an element of society, you're no longer talking about the individual. Understand this. Just because you want society to recognize something, just because you want society to do something for you, doesn't give you a right to society, to the social dynamics of this. This is where the problem comes in there. You have to tolerate my intolerance. It's one of the problems that you have that admit. I will admit that there are things that people do that are wrong, legal, okay, harmful to an individual. I agree. But you know what? That's something that has to be tolerated within the society. Because if you don't, you open up a flood of people sitting up there trying to determine what is and isn't a right, what is and isn't an individual. I don't give an F about society. I'm selfish. That's fine. All right, but then don't sit up there and ask or expect anything from that society. Now, I'm not saying that. So I don't understand this. I'm not saying Psycho does. Okay, I'm pointing this out from an academic point of view. All right, I'll use that term loosely because I'm not an academic in any way, shape, or form. So I hope people haven't done this. But the thing is when you talk about an individual, your rights start and stop at your nose. Period.
Psycho kind of points something out. If I have to tolerate your intolerance, you have to tolerate my intolerance of your intolerance. And technically, yeah, but that's the thing. You're not infringing on anybody's rights. Say I don't agree with you. Sure, that's fine. It's if you jump to the point of I don't agree with what you're saying, therefore I'm going to try to get you fired from your job or try to get your banking institution to stop banking with you. At that point in time, you're taking away the rights of somebody else, and I can't support that. That's not being intolerant in the sense that we're talking. That is, it's basically what cancel culture is. That's you infringing upon somebody else's rights. That's not simple intolerance.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we're talking about, we here are talking about separate things and so forth. As we're talking about this in a generic point of view, I guarantee you, Doku does not agree with me on a lot of things. Okay, I guarantee you that Jensen does not agree with me on a lot of things. All right, we're having a conversation here, but this is a conversation, all right, that you can't have on the left. This is a conversation I can barely have with someone like Memes, quite frankly, because Memes at least attempts it. But the reality is, on the left, is there is no requirement, there's no intention. You're not talking in good faith. At least with Memes, it's in good faith. Now, granted, Memes is he tends to go toward the loony bin. All right, but at least he's arguing in good faith. The left isn't, though. The left's not having that conversation. You can go on my Twitter feed. You can see how many times I get blocked because I point out that the left is not talking in good faith. We stop having a conversation, and I end up playing the game of, okay, let's play your game of define the term. And when you define the term, I come back and, okay, if this is what your term is, what about this? That's why they come back with, oh, I'm tired of these whataboutisms. It's not about a whataboutism. It's about trying to define a common sense of terms, a common definition of terms. And I'm even willing, all right, to listen to your definition. If this is how you want to define it, then this is how you have to keep it to define. This is how you have to keep that principle.
So you saw that Twitter thread too, huh?
Okay. Well, I've had that Twitter thread. There's been multiple Twitter threads along those lines, quite frankly. But yes, I did see that from Doku.
Yeah, I did want to touch on what Psycho said real quick. I don't like what you're saying, so I'm just opposing it. And that's fine. Again, that's part of having an open, healthy, open social discourse. Like, yeah, we don't have to agree, but I'm not going to sit here and like say I don't like what Psycho's saying, therefore I'm going to ban you or put you in timeout. Because yeah, sure, we can agree to disagree. We don't have to agree with each other. That's fine. I have no problem with you opposing what any of us are saying because you have your right to your own opinion. You have the right to disagree, and you have the right to voice your opposition to it. What I have an issue with is when people say, I don't like this person, so therefore I'm going to infringe on their right to speak. That's something that this goes back to my point. The reason I can't support the left, and don't get me wrong, I don't like it when I see this on the right either, and I won't support them when they do it. But this is par for the course when it comes to the left. And they see something they don't like. Hey, let's get an outrage mob together. Let's dox this person. Let's get them fired from their job. Hey, Bank of America, why do you have a banking account with this person? Hey, this person has a Patreon. Patreon, did you know you support a racist? And they won't look into it. They won't say, like, well, what did they do or what did they say that's racist? And it's no, you just call them racist and then use that as ammunition to try to get them shut down, ostracized from society, and ultimately take away your political opponent with the scummiest kind of possible way of doing so. That's something that I can't support.
And it's gotten play. Okay, let's be honest. Why do they do it? Because it works. All right, they know that they can use the term racism, scream somebody's a racist, all right, and immediately it shuts up the conversation. Okay, when a person comes back and says, okay, what was racist about it, then they get angry. All right, if you ever notice, that's when they raise the temperature, and they do that for people like Memes. Because if somebody gets angry with it, you didn't agree with my feelings here on this. Okay, now I'm going to be mad. Now, a lot of people look at me and say, well, I'm saying, look at all the conversation and yelling you do, you ranting son of a bitch. which is, you know, you can say this is an accurate statement. But if you have noticed, all right, that's more of an acting thing, unless, you know, for the most part. It's not necessarily meant in any kind of real rage. It's more play acting than anything else. Now, did I get mad at certain people and yell at them? Like Mad Dodge? Well, yeah. but it had to be done, okay? Because he just doesn't listen, right? He didn't respond to the comments, right? He just went on with the inane conversation many times. I loved it, but at the same time, we both knew that we could put aside that at any point in time. It didn't mean that we agreed. It didn't even mean that we came to a consensus to agree. Okay. There's the difference, right? When you saw those kind of arguments between me and Cabby, okay, same thing. Now, I would say, you know, well, and see, obviously, if you're yelling at this person and then you're yelling at somebody else and you're yelling at this third person over here, do you think the problem might be you? You might start looking at your saddle. I would say that, except for the fact that Mad Dodge yelled often at other people, and so did Cabby. So I feel kind of safe. I feel at home. You know, my community, the yellers.
Well, I'm definitely not innocent when it comes to having some very, how should I say, passionate and loud-voiced rants about things. And in case anybody doesn't know, B.R.B stands for Banters, Rants, and Bullshit. So yeah, we're kind of known for doing this from time to time. But what I
dealing with dissent, and you will like it and accept it.
Well, what I do want to point out, though, is me yelling or me getting passionate, me raising my voice at things, is not me trying to shut you up. It's not me trying to intimidate you. It's me maybe getting pissed off, maybe actually legitimately angry. Maybe I'm just in a mood to rant because I feel like it. But what I won't do is I won't try to go out there and try to drum up an outrage mob and get you fired from your job because I disagree with the fact that you disagree with me. That's intimidation. That's actual legitimate intimidation. And, you know, like you were saying, and say like, oh, you're yelling, the problem is you. It's like, no, the problem's not me. I still stand by my statements. I stand by my opinions. If you can prove me wrong, if you can disprove it, I'm also the first person to say, okay, you know what? I was wrong. You're right. I concede. But I still won't go out there and try to actually engage in intimidation tactics to try to silence people I politically disagree with. That's something I'm not willing to do. It's part of my convictions. And like a stupid right-leaning individual, I refuse to go against it. Which is part of the reason that I end up arguing with people in circles for hours, if not days, on Twitter, simply because they keep using the goalpost or an actual whataboutism. You're just arguing a whataboutism. In order for it to be a whataboutism, it has to have equivalency. You're arguing a false equivalency. Well, that's a whataboutism. No, it's not, you moron. 3 days later, you're just arguing a whataboutism. No, it's not. Because, again, I stand by my convictions. I'm also hard-headed and refuse to back down in arguments. But it's still not intimidation. The left engages in intimidation. The right does not.
As often. Don't get me wrong, though. The right has
the
ability to engage in intimidation. All right.
I take that back. The right engages in intimidation, but it's not a standard go-to tactic.
Right, it's not a go-to tactic necessarily most of the time, but that's mainly because it's not allowed to be. Okay, I mean let's be perfectly frank. Okay.
Well, yeah, it gets criticized. We like you said, we police our own. So if we see someone like, oh look, this person did this, let's dox them and get them fired from their job. You know who's going to come after them first? It'll be their peers.
Yes.
Like that's what happens if you try to pull that shit on the right. We will come after you and say, no, look, what you're doing is wrong, and we'll put you on blast. And other people will come out and say, look, what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. Don't do this. They won't actually join the outrage mob and then start trying to do the same damn thing.
And I'm going to point out one more thing about the right versus the left. Okay, the right, when it does things, right, will normally realize that even if they feel that they were correct, okay, even if they felt like it was justifiable to put this person on blast, if that person is considered a friend, they will apologize. There will be some sort of mea culpa in some degree. Okay, that's because people have to learn to, it's part of acceptance of other people. Do you see that on the left? Yeah, you do. Very rarely, though. It's not their go-to position, and what's more is when it does happen, generally the outright mob then attacks the person for quote unquote being weak and getting them. But if you become a spineless thing and you back away from a principle on the right, John Cena, then you understand things. Okay. Where's the left laughing about John Cena or supporting John Cena? You notice how the left doesn't try and stand up for him right now after what he did?
True.
Right? So that's just an example of things. Businesses that make money off social media should not be allowed to police speech. Exactly.
I don't disagree there.
Right? Which is something that I think that we have to have we have to have come to Jesus with. Right? We got to sit up there and say, look, if you're a platform, you're either a platform or you're not a platform. You can't be both. Not that you aren't both. You can't be. It's not that position can't hold. Right? The center cannot hold. And so yes, that's what the center can't hold. Or am I missing something here? I mean, Jensen, you've been quiet as you've been watching her chewing on your popcorn this entire time.
No, I've not been enjoying my popcorn much. But yeah, no, seriously, listening to you two, it's quite entertaining to hear. And could I have given an opinion? Yeah, except at the end of the day, you both were actually giving perfectly valid opinions. And to be blunt, this is an American discussion much more than it will ever be a British discussion. After all, my country doesn't really have free speech as such, and your country is losing free speech, even though it's fighting against it. Well, pretending to fight against it. Well, okay, it's letting it happen, but, what the hey? Just look at it this way. You haven't yet, stress this word, you haven't yet turned into Scotland that has banned free speech because free speech is wrong. I just want you to think about all of this, okay? An entire country has banned free speech. How does this not appall you guys?
Well, I remember you telling me about that story, and I believe I had a rather strong reaction to it. It was a combination of disgust, shock, and amusement. Yeah. Did you tell MC about this?
I believe I mentioned to you, MC.
That's the first time I heard this.
Oh my God, yes. The SNP, as you know, with Nicola Sturgeon, and yes, I'm going to try and do this without being too insulting to anyone, in their infinite wisdom, put through a bill in their own parliament to get rid of free speech because they didn't want people saying anything. Well, quite simply saying anything. I mean, I've got no other way of saying this. You guys like to claim that yours is the country of free speech. How the hell is America not saying anything, except for the fact that, sorry to say,
COVID-19 lockdowns?
No,
we've been a bit distracted, I'll be honest with you.
That's the reason you're not invading. There's a big ass difference. And no, you are correct. It's basically a top hat, and we know it. It's bad to say. I mean, I know you guys call Canada America's top hat. Yeah, we got Scotland. Feel bad for us. Okay, it's as simple as that.
Well, I remember the example you used when you were describing this piece of legislation to me, Jensen. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that everybody in the chat has had at least one instance where they sat down at the dinner table and had a disagreement with a family member, whether it was
whether
it was about whoever is this prime minister or the president, or if it was about whether The Last Jedi was a good movie, I'm sure you've sat down and had a conversation with a family member at some point in time that was a rather heated disagreement.
Yes.
Well, that family member could call the cops on you and get you arrested.
Yes, he's not actually joking. To simply put, the attitude that was given during the 1930s and 1940s in
Psycho.
Wehrmacht Germany.
I resemble that remark.
I'm shocked. I really am. But they would have the thing how the children would quite simply grass on their parents to have them taken away and re-educated. Well, Scotland has now made that the standard way of doing things. Maybe it's me, okay? Maybe I just don't understand. I'm willing to accept this. But how the unholy hell can that be acceptable? Okay? They have got rid of free speech. You can't disagree with people. I mean, good God. If me and my sister sat down at the table, we start fighting before dinner has hit the table. We will be arguing literally, is that plate hot? No, it's not. Yes, it is. And we will go from there. Technically, we can now be arrested for this. Anything that offends somebody can now be treated as illegal. The police can turn up, come into your house, and drag you away from your family. You hear about this in the dystopian movies and things like that. Well, Scotland's made it legal.
To put this in a slightly humorous context, it's like dialing 911. They ask you what your emergency is. My brother said The Last Jedi was a bad movie. The response you should expect, or should be given, is a sir or ma'am or whatever you identify as. Who cares? This line is for emergency uses only. Please have a nice day. Don't dial us again unless you have an actual emergency. Whereas Scotland will say, "Oh, okay, we'll be right over."
Yeah.
Would you describe the perpetrator, please?
He's
It's
that
my
bastard
dad.
over there. He's that bad over there. He's got a freaking no side through his lightsaber.
It's horrifying to think, though, isn't it? Okay.
How dare you? He's part of the Phantom Menace. Get him! Beat him! Okay.
I saw my brother watching Clownfish TV on YouTube last night, and I just can't cope with it. Please come arrest him.
Please don't make those jokes. In Scotland, they would. They would actually do this. This would class as an official declaration. If you lived over there, they could send people round to take.
Check his history.
your
Check his
family.
web history. You see, Prager University. How dare he? He watched 3 or 4 episodes.
Oh no, I'm just putting this up just because. MC doesn't argue with his family. His family watches with great concern as he berates squirrels for voting wrong.
I do not berate squirrels for voting incorrectly.
No, they've all learnt to vote correctly.
No, it has nothing to do with that. That's not their job. If you see me berating them about voting, is they didn't correct the ballots of others.
Do you know? I could believe that that's how they did it.
It's not a matter of who or how people vote. It's a matter of who counts the votes. Just remember that.
This is true, actually.
And you're not going to see me disagreeing on that one.
Hence our current freaking divide that we have in the country right now, especially over in my little neck of the woods where we're doing an audit.
Oh, is that actually finished yet, or are they still?
No, they put out a little thing today from the Arizona Audit Commission just to let you know the audit is continuing.
I'm just going to ask because again, I don't know these things. How long can it fucking take to go through this shit?
Quite a while.
Honestly,
quite a while, especially when you're documenting every single thing that you've been doing. For example, one of the things that they're doing is they're documenting every time somebody gets up to take a piss, when they left, when they came back.
Okay.
Right? So when it comes down to doing a forensic audit of every single piece of material, think about this. You're taking every ballot, you're subjecting it to several different types of tests, all right, to see whether or not it's a valid ballot or not. Okay, how long can that take when you're doing it one ballot at a time? Pretty damn long time, because you can't rely. And what's more is you're not allowed to shove those ballots through a different count. Well, for example, if you came up and said, "I have my own counting machine, I'm going to use this to tally votes," it would corrupt those ballots. You're not allowed to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So what they've been doing, and this is something else. Each ballot that comes in, right, is captured and kept inside of a separate container. Okay. And that container is important because that container tells you how many total ballots there's been, all right, inside each container. One of the things that they're having to go through right now is they have noticed on the Dominion machines, the number of ballots that are supposed to be in the container are not matching the number of ballots that are in the containers. And you got to go through those one at a time. In fact, the Dominion machines, in one case, reported 200 ballots counted, and there's only 90 ballots in the container.
Interesting. Okay. Good job there's no such thing as corruption. That would be terrible.
When somebody agrees with me, I question why they're sniffing my ass.
Wow.
Well, you know,
I have been known to take the the opposite point of view just to continue an argument. That I have done that. I must admit to it. I'll cop to that now.
well, MC, I got to point something out to you real quick. Your neck of the woods should have taken a hint from Georgia. You can't have an accurate forensic audit that will stand up to scrutiny if you shred the ballots after you count them.
Well, we had a law that prevented that from happening. Okay,
So
that
did
law
probably.
that law also applied to those Dominion machines being deleted, with the data being deleted on the Dominion machines. But it seems somehow that the data on the Dominion machines were deleted. All right, so we already have some criminality that we're going to sit up there and have to deal with.
No, also, if I remember correctly, those machines weren't supposed to have any capability of accessing the internet, but yet they did. We're not talking about that anymore, and I'm kind of curious as to why.
Because there's a bigger fight coming with that, specifically over the routers. All right. So there's a number of things that are happening along that. We'll just wait till it gets adjudicated. That's why. That is an issue. That is an issue, and it is one that is vitally, in many ways, vitally important. Okay, but we're going to have to wait for the adjudication to take place before we can go any further with that.
And this kind of, to use the favorite word of the current press secretary, circles back around to something we were talking about earlier in regards to. It would seem the greatest fear is not election integrity or not removing a sitting president who's already been confirmed by Congress. I see this. Now's my chance. I get to criticize the right for saying things that are stupid. Just because this audit, let's say this audit comes back and proves that there were discrepancies to such a degree that it would flip the state. Okay, but guess what? Joe Biden's already been confirmed by Congress. He's not going to cease being the president and be removed and put Trump in office simply because, oh, look, the election was not secure, not safe. That's not going to happen. I want you guys to realize that right now. If it came back and was like, well, Trump actually won Pennsylvania and Arizona and Nevada and Georgia, and that's still not going to get rid of Joe Biden. Sorry, guys. Don't get your hopes up on that one. What will happen, and this is what really scares the authoritarian left. they had their one shot at having ballot harvesting, mass nationwide vote by mail, and electronic voting, all these things that could potentially have tampered with the election or make it not quite as safe and secure as they claim it to be. They have one shot at this. If they screw this up, that's never going to happen again. And that's what they're scared about. And I think this has a lot to do with the upcoming midterm election and why they're continuing to, trying their best to drag out the whole COVID thing, is because they want to do the exact same thing in the midterm election and maintain uniform power across all branches of government up into and through 2024. That is going to be a lot more difficult if everybody has to have a hand filled out chain of custody, proven identity, in person, cast your vote ballot. That's what I think the real fear for them is. Because do I believe the whole vote by mail system, especially put in place so last minute, was safe and secure like they claim? No one with a functioning mind would believe that. Now, was there enough discrepancy? Was there enough whoopsie-daisy boo-boos to flip states for one candidate or the other? I don't know. I could give an opinion on it, but it's not going to matter because I simply don't know. The only way you would be able to figure that out is to have a thorough forensic audit that could stand up to scrutiny, especially scrutiny from the opposition. Because they're going to do their best to prove no, this is wrong, or you didn't do this procedure right, or you broke this rule here, therefore the whole thing is invalid. Why do you think the Arizona audit's taking so long? Is because they're, as MC had said earlier, crossing all the T's and dotting on the I's to make sure that there is absolutely nothing wrong. They are going for a perfect, by the book, you cannot put this under a microscope and find something wrong with it. That's going to take time.
Well, to do it correctly, but in one sense, I disagree with you. All right, I do agree, however, I wholeheartedly agree with you that Biden is not going to be tossed out. Okay, even if the number of ballots or the discrepancies in the ballots cause an issue, right? That is not going to happen. Okay. I don't disagree with you that it will cause other people to lock these things down. Okay. That's another issue. Right. I agree with you. Okay. The big problem, though, is what's really terrifying the left. That isn't it. What's really terrifying the left is they didn't get a very large. They thought that they were going to take the Senate whole hog. They thought it was impossible for them to lose the Senate, and they ended up with a 50-50 Senate. Okay. If the malfeasance in Arizona is proven, we don't know if it will. I to this day do not know what the results of this audit are going to be. We've heard several things. I mentioned several things, but 200 votes in a bin don't mean anything. That doesn't mean that something's going to flip. If it makes sense to you? Does it mean that there's a problem here? Yes, it does indicate that there's a problem. Okay, but it doesn't mean that something's going to flip the state from one to the other. There are certain other things that will take place, but one of the things that can take place and will in Arizona is it won't affect the Biden election, but it will the senator. All right, and our senator right now is a left frickin' commie-loving coward named Mark Kelly. That everyone goes, oh, he's a hero. Mark Kelly is a deceitful pig who hides behind his wife, who was badly injured in a gun by being shot by another leftist. All right, at an event here in Tucson. All right, that man is a disgrace, and I'm saying this because no one drags their wife and uses them like a prop. What kind of human freaking being does that kind of crap? Well, Mark Kelly does, because he doesn't give a shit about his wife, really. All right,
real quick,
that's the kind of individual that he is. That can cause this state to say, okay, you are no longer our U.S. senator. You're being recalled. That's what they're terrified of. Because right now they've got their little 50 majority. You remove Mark Kelly, it's gone.
Oh, that's a fair point. I can't disagree with that. And that's why I do think this is an issue coming up, not necessarily for the presidential election. And I do think it's got to remove Joe Biden is a distraction. it's going to be a lot more important for the House and the Senate than it is the presidential seat.
Go Green 2024. Free marketing for Lacey Green. Oh my God.
I do want to touch on what Patch said, though, just to write in any old name for the election. Maybe we'll get President Kermit the Frog. Patch, I don't know if you know, but when it comes to write-ins, there's at least a few 100 ballots every year where people are voting for Mickey Mouse. and they have to actually, I did know somebody on a line chat back when I still used that application. There was a guy who would get all his Navy buddies to actually write him in, to the point where he got enough votes that he would actually get a call with people having to have him clarify his identity and the fact that he's a U.S. citizen, what his qualifications are, because he'd get that many votes. And it was only a couple hundred, but it was enough to actually have him be viewed as a legitimate candidate. So that does happen. And also, I want to touch on something Psycho had said previously. Jensen, can you pull that back up? Because I'm not seeing it.
Yep, one moment. Assuming you mean that.
Oh, yeah. And this is a chance. Thank you. This is a chance where I actually get to criticize the right. And I have criticized the right about the January 6th. If you guys were going down to protest at the Capitol building, that's dumb. That is going to be really stupid. Why? Because you're giving the enemy more ammunition to use against you. Protest anywhere else, but don't go to the Capitol building. But lo and behold, a bunch of idiots go there, and it gives enough credence, enough credibility, enough reason for them to be able to use it as political ammunition. It was stupid. Don't fall for the honeypot.
Okay, well, let's talk about this for a moment, January 6th, if you don't mind. I'm going to be real blunt here. First of all, the problem with that isn't the protest at the Capitol or anything else. I don't have a problem with the protesting at the Capitol. Right? I have a problem, however, okay, with the fact that it was a riot. They let it become a riot, okay? And this goes back, and I'm going to be real blunt. Riots need to be put down. Riots need to be put down forcibly. I don't care who you are, okay? But then again, one of the problems is when people are defining what's a riot versus what's a mostly peaceful protest. If you take an example, all right, of what a mostly peaceful protest, what they called a mostly peaceful protest, and you compare it to what happened in the Capitol, that's not even a protest. Okay, that's the kind of mildness that you end up with. Back to like I said, a definition of terms. Right? If what your standard is, what your principles are. I have a very clear principle. Rioting isn't tolerated. Okay, I had no problem with protest. Rioting won't be tolerated. The moment you fling something from the crowd at the officers, the moment you bash something, the moment you break something, should be actionable enough, because the violence has begun. At that point, the state has the authority and has the duty to suppress it immediately, all of it. And if that calls for going in there with billy clubs, so be it. If that calls for, first rank, kneel, fire. All right, next rank, kneel, fire. All right, reload. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I'm not opposed to using violence. Okay? And once violence is used, then it's peace through superior firepower. Understand the rules. Is that clear?
I don't really disagree with you. I mean, it's not. It's not an idea. Damn, Patch, that was good. That was good. But I don't really disagree with you, MC. The only thing I can say is it's not something I'm comfortable with, but it's something that I recognize as kind of I guess a necessary evil. And there does come a point in time where, hey, it's like someone saying, "Hey, look, I don't."
Look what you said there. I'm not comfortable with it. Your fifis are not important anymore.
That's the thing. I recognize it though. Like, do I like it? No, I don't. But I recognize that, guess what? You can sit there and say, hey, look, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to fight you. It's not going to stop the other guy from punching you. And as Patch had said previously in the chat, you'll get walked over if you do nothing. So yeah, what are you going to do? Let the guy just sit there and punch you in the face, no matter how many times you say, I don't want to fight you. Well, guess what? It's not going to change the fact that you're still getting the crap beat out of you. You're going to have to punch back. And we're getting dangerously close to that point where, MC, as me and you were talking about this earlier, it's getting to the point where you're not going to have a choice. You're not going to have an option. You're either going to A, get the crap beat out of you, or B, you finally stand up and punch back. They're not giving you a choice. And that's the aspect of things that I don't like. But if it comes down to it, I'm going to punch back. It's that simple. I'm not going to just stand there and let the crap get beaten out of me and then get walked over. A lot of people are waking up to that reality.
You can wish in one hand and shit in the other, and see which one fills.
A saying I haven't heard before, but appropriate.
Then again, Patch is there. I disagree with MC again. Clearly, our political and social problems are Wendy's fault. Where's the beef? Had to do it. But no, this will, I mean, we can play these games like this. But when it really comes down to it, do you have principles or don't you? Are you living on your sleeve with your heart on your sleeve? Is that how you're defining what should and shouldn't be there? To be honest, there's too many people doing it. There's far too many that are engaged in the whole sleeve, snot rocket thing going on. Okay, but that's where I have the problem with the left and how the left has made things, has pushed things. But this is not saying that I don't feel. Let me explain something to you. And for those who don't know, who've never gone through this, the military trains us, all right, to put your emotions aside and act or react, right? For example, when you're talking about shooting on a range and so forth, the military is very good about giving you the tools you need to go into combat, right, and open fire on another human being and kill them. And while you're doing that, you are put an overlay in your brain. I'm not shooting a human being. I'm just servicing a target. Boom, go to the next target. Boom, go to the next target. Like an automaton in a way. You are servicing targets. You are setting your emotions aside. Now, eventually, those emotions, you're gonna have to deal with those emotions. Eventually. But the military is giving you the tools that in the moment you can survive. That's what that tool is there for. Okay? But eventually emotions rise. I'm not ignoring the fact that emotions don't take place. Okay? I am trying to put up that you have to have the surrency of your intellect. Your intellect overall needs to override the emotions. It can be carried too far. Yes, on an individual level. Okay, it can be carried too far. It's not that I don't acknowledge emotions. It's not that I don't acknowledge emotions exist, and we exist as human beings with emotions. It's which one is going to which one's predominant. Is it intellect or is it emotions? Which one's predominant? Not necessarily always the case, right? It doesn't mean that your intellect is always going to override your emotions. It means that predominantly it does. As long as you live in that world, you'll be okay. Why? Because that's how mankind evolved. That's how we have become the dominant species on the planet. If we don't
bring up a little thing, you do realize it won't actually be that long before the helmets actually plug in to the operators, and you'll actually start getting a score based on the people you take out. At that point, your emotions will actually fade away, and I will prove that because you get pretty much any small group playing Call of Duty or Modern Warfare, whatever, and they do not give a monkey's nuts that they're blowing people away as long as their score is going up. That is the point you start to become nervous.
Well, you can't argue with that. But it's an effective technique. You have to admit that.
I'm not disagreeing. All I'm doing is pointing out it's going to happen. I truly and devoutly believe that if they're not already working on it, which I actually think they are, they really ought to be. Is this a bad thing? Yes, because soldiers will cease to care, and unless they start, air quotes, losing points for killing innocents, and yes, I do know your issue about innocence, so you could change innocence to same group. At that point, they won't care. They will walk up to the enemy. I mean, honestly, if you get any 10 people playing Call of Duty, they will commit so many war crimes. It's not even funny. And they will do it with a song in their heart, laughing and joking. And that's for real. And how long will it be before these are plugged into people and all they see out of their visors are the enemy as faceless nothings? Something to think about.
Thank you for the nihilistic view of what's coming down the world there, Jensen. Boy, what a happy viewpoint.
Yeah, just thought I'd cheer everyone up with that.
I don't disagree with it. To a point, I don't disagree with them. I don't think we'll get to that point because I don't think that humans will adapt that way. But that's a separate issue. All right, human beings, the way we function and so forth, I don't think we'll adapt in that manner necessarily. All right, I do recognize the danger, however, and you are not exaggerating when you say that danger is real, because it is. Okay,
Well,
you can't deny that.
Well, and what Jensen was describing is essentially a detachment, and look at what human beings are capable when a certain degree of detachment has been realized, and we already have something to point to, and prove this point as factually correct. I'll use this example. Half of the crap you see people say on Twitter and Facebook, would you say that to somebody's face at a bar after a few beers? Because I would be willing to bet the answer is usually no. Why? Because as we were talking earlier at the beginning of the stream, there will be accountability for those actions. Usually the accountability happens to be instead of you getting doxxed, it's you getting punched in the face multiple times and then a free ride in an ambulance to the nearest hospital.
We need to induce the proper perspective. It's an attitude adjustment. It's the old Hank Williams song.
Well, and it goes back to the principle of positive and negative reinforcement and how effective the reinforcement itself is. And again, as we were talking about earlier, when it comes to accountability, oh yeah, you're going to Twitter and you're going to try to dox someone, get them fired from their job. Well, if the same thing happens to you as a result of you doing that to somebody else, chances are you're probably not going to do it for very long. The same way, it's not it's not to the same degree of severity as, say, getting beaten within an inch of your life for spitting in somebody's drink and grabbing their wife's tits. But there is that idea of positive negative reinforcement. But the more detached you get from direct real world consequences that affect you in very negative ways, the more willing and more able people are to do things that, again, would get you beaten to within an inch of your life. And in this aspect, the degree of technological advancement that we have as a society has led people to be, ironically enough, less civilized and more barbaric in their actions.
If I may just make another little point, because I'm enjoying myself currently. Based on my idea about scores, targeting, yada, 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 I'm going to disagree with MC here. This doesn't happen often. But I disagree with you, Sam. And my disagreement is this. Drone pilots. They look through their cameras, they look at their screens, and they shoot their guns. What is the difference? Once they start getting points for successfully targeting things, which again is coming, at that point you've got drone operators that are playing computer games, and that gets scary.
I don't disagree that's a like I said, there is an aspect of that. I just think that humans will evolve differently, though, in the overall scheme of things. Understand that I'm not talking specifics here because I don't know how human beings will evolve. Right? I just know that human beings will remain animals. All right, that have an emotional overlay to them, and that's a part of our dual nature. All right, and that will continue to exist. How that will express itself, all right, in the long term, when you do that and repress it, yeah, I do agree that you're running the risks of what you're going to turn people into, non-caring freaking animatronic type of critters. I'm not saying that's not going to happen. What I'm saying is that there will always be a reaction once from a feeling standpoint, once that becomes obvious. Does that make sense? Right?
No, it does. And I would like to answer to Patch. I actually have calculated an entire points value based on running over people. Let me know. I'm happy to share the points value with you if you're interested.
So you've gone the whole Death Race 2000.
Oh, I know. I have taken that as a basic idea, tweaked it down, and I know how to do this shit. So yes. And I'm not going to say any names, but I have been in a vehicle that, let's just say, gained bonus points hitting somebody in the foot during the night based on the inability to see them clearly in the dark. I think you understand what I mean without me using the words.
All right, Jensen, the answer was going to come, or the question was going to come, so I expect a valid answer. How many points is Squirrel Girl worth?
Actually, depend on who's writing her. You actually do get bonus points. She is harder to see at night. Again, I'm wording it so very, very carefully there.
You got to give bonus points simply for the fact that her genetics makes her harder to hit.
This is true.
Right? I mean, dexterity plays a role here. Once you go past a certain point, you got to start giving people points for that.
Oh, yeah.
The quick ones are hard to get away easier.
It's true.
Now the question is, can you land the killing blow before she manages to get to a tree? That's bonus points, right?
Well, okay, you get full points for the kill. If you only wound, well, that gives somebody else the points. You just have to deal with the fact that you didn't get full points because the wounding took place.
Kill stealing.
So somebody else. So it is. You got to understand things. This is a competition.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you are trying to win.
By the way, people, just note the way we're talking and now put that into the military. Suddenly my ideas have got possibilities, don't they? Yeah, I know we're joking, but nonetheless.
The vistas open up. Look at how that.
That's the thing. It's a joke until it's not.
Well, the thing, what people don't realize is Jensen is putting us out here so he can capitalize on the idea later, right, and have royalties for life.
Don't
I mean, as
this. This is witnesses now that I've done this on this date. This is now recorded. So if someone comes up with the idea later, I can go, I'm sorry, you're copying my idea from so-and-so date.
Copyright infringement.
Oh, yeah.
Well, see, technically, Jensen, this should work for you. It's been said here on the internet. It is recorded. It is down in history. So you technically have protection under first to file copyright law. There
we go. Jacob, you wanted me very specifically to say weebs are gay and get into the gulag. There you go, sir. Is that good for you?
Who's gulag material now, boy?
I just like it noted that I'm allergic to rocks.
Meanwhile, Doku's like, I gotta figure out a way out of this. This is
I won't feel too bad, Doku. You're not going to be breaking rocks. You'll be out cutting the trees down with a toothpick. Off you go, mate.
I'm going to break a rock. I want to break rocks. I want to go collect them in space. You guys don't mind, do you?
No, you get your Space Rocks, we're good with this.
Just put it out there, folks. Everybody enjoy. Nothing
And
to see here. Nothing to
Psycho,
see.
the reward is survival and the destruction of your enemies. Just as you asked.
It's actually not a bad reward.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem, mate. I know that you're actually going to agree with this, even if there's going to be a part of you going, oh no. But I'm not wrong, am I?
Well, I mean, if you think about it objectively, what's the best reward you can get? You continue to exist and your enemy doesn't. What more can you ask for?
Exactly.
Women. We'll put it out there, folks. I'm putting it out there.
Well,
women, you get to participate in the game in the little round table circle. You know, the kind that they had if you ever watched Logan's Run, right? Where you just walked into the tube. You got access to the tube.
Fair.
Can't really disagree with that. I'm trying to think of a rebuttal, but I got nothing. Fair enough. Touche.
I have solutions, folks. I have ways of making these solutions obvious.
Psycho, it's a great idea. You can ask not to play. We're never going to take that away from you. Unfortunately, asking not to play just means you're choosing to lose. I just want you to have a little think about that. Do you really want to choose to lose?
You need a race of maintenance people. Psycho is volunteering to be in the race of maintenance. Don't you understand this? You need that. I mean, don't you understand? It's like having lower enlisted in the Air Force. Okay.
Oh, again, you guys are overlooking something real quick. Psycho, you can ask not to play. Now you're making the assumption that there was a choice to begin with, and even if there was, do you really want to not participate in the game where the reward is your continued existence or not? Because whether you want to be a part of the game or not.
Well, the fact that you're trying to get rid of freaking labor, what the hell's wrong with you? You're not. They can choose not to play, right? We have other uses for people. This is human capital we're talking about.
Citizens, civilians,
and others. And others. Okay?
Well, I'm just making the point that considering what the reward of the game is, it's probably in your best interest to choose to participate.
Well, that's your opinion.
Oh yeah, it is my opinion, but I still think it's a very valid one.
That's still your opinion. I mean, if people don't want to participate, I really don't see a problem with this.
What happens if I win? Life. What happens if I lose?
Actually,
death.
Patch, you are correct. That is the best way to decide not to play. In fact, it's the only way to decide not to play.
Can't play death game if you're already dead. Big brain moment.
Yeah. Just saying. That is how you do it, mate. I'm not going to disagree with you.
What if I told you the reward is that you get isekai and you get a harem of fantasy girls? Will that work?
Based on this modern society, I would question the use of the term girls.
Fair enough.
Okay, argue against that one. I dare you.
I know that is a rabbit hole. Pun somewhat intended.
And yeah, exactly. Do you really want to mention rabbit hole involving questionable girls? Again, you're possibly digging yourself into a deeper pit. Here, borrow a shovel.
Do I at least get an excavator? Is it solar powered?
No. You get a very tiny trowel. Off you go.
That's just rude.
Yes. Well, it has been 1 hour and 53 minutes. I think we have fulfilled everything that needs to be said in this discussion. And I think we can all agree I'm right. I'm glad you all came to this. And thank you, MC, for coming. Thank you, Doku, for coming. Is there any final words from either of you?
Well, the only thing I have to say is a word from our sponsor, Goidcoin. Buy it, sell it, use it, abuse it. Goidcoin.
I have no idea what Goidcoin is. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to abuse it. I'm not going to use it. Well, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'll do it. All right. That's my final word.
Okay. And it's a crypto coin. So just so you know. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen, and whatever else you want to define yourself as. See you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.